The Los Angeles Police Department recently recovered a damaged VHS tape from the security office of the Cecil Hotel. What you are about to see is not a ghost and it's not a prank. It's a final 50 minutes of a man who realized too late that the person standing in the hallway was him. It was a quiet, rainy Tuesday night at the infamous Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. I had been working as a night shift security guard there for over 5 years. The hotel was old, and its dark history always made me feel a little bit uneasy. I was sitting in the small, cramped security office, surrounded by flickering television monitors. The building was almost empty, and the only sound was a humming of the old air conditioner. Most people stayed away from this place at night, believing it was cursed by the many tragedies of the past. At exactly 2 a.m., the hotel went completely silent. I started my usual routine of checking the surveillance cameras that covered every floor and hallway. The monitors displayed grainy analog color footage that looked like it belonged in the 1990s. The hallways were dimly lit with a sickly yellow glow that created long dancing shadows on the peeling wallpaper. As I switched to the camera on the 6th floor, I noticed something strange. A figure was standing perfectly still at the very end of the long dark corridor. It did not look like a normal guest at all. The figure was a man wearing the exact same dark blue uniform that I was wearing. He was tall and stood with his back turned toward the camera. His heart started to beat faster as I stared at the screen. I checked the duty roster, but I was the only guard scheduled to work tonight. "Hello? Is someone there?" I whispered to myself, even though no one could hear me. The man did not move an inch. He just stood there like a statue. I felt a cold chill run down my spine as I watched him through the monitor. I decided to use the hotel's internal radio to check if any maintenance workers were still in the building. "This is security. Is anyone on the 6th floor right now?" I asked. My voice is shaking slightly. There was no response, only a loud crackling static noise that filled the small office. I tried again, but the radio stayed silent. Suddenly, the man on the screen started to turn his head very slowly. It was a jerky, unnatural movements, like a broken doll. I leaned closer to the monitor, trying to see his face through the heavy analog noise. When he finally turned around, I nearly fell out of my chair in shock. The man on the screen had my face. It was a perfect copy of me, the same eyes, the same hair, and the same scar on my chin. But something was very wrong with his expressions. His mouth was stretched into an impossibly white, frozen grin that reached from ear to ear. His eyes were wide open and glowing with a terrifying bright yellow light. He looked directly into the camera lens as if he knew exactly where I am sitting in the office. I felt a wave of fear, terror wash over me. I grabbed my flashlight and my heavy keys, wanting to run out of the hotel immediately. But then I remembered the strict rules of the Cecil Hotel. Never leave your post until the sun comes out. I looked back at the monitor for the 6th floor, but the hallway was now completely empty. The man had vanished into thin air. I quickly switched to the camera in the lobby, and my blood ran cold. The doppelganger was now standing right outside the security office door, staring into the hallway camera. The creature, looking exactly like me, began to mimic my movements on the screen. When I wiped the sweat from my forehead, it did the same. When I shook my head in disbelief, it copied mine perfectly. It was like looking into an evil, distorted mirror. Then it leaned toward the office door and began to whisper. Even through the thick wood, I could hear my own voice speaking back to me. "Let me in, John. I am tired of standing in the dark. I want to take your place now," it said in a metallic tone. I checked the locks on the heavy metal door, making sure they were all secure. The stretching sound started again, the sound of long, sharp fingernails dragging against the door frame. I realized that this thing was not human. It was a mimic, a predator from the darkness that lived within a hotel's walls. The power suddenly flickered, and the monitors began to show nothing but static. I was trapped in the small office with only my flashlight for protection. I could hear its heavy, uneven footsteps passing back and forth just outside in the quiet lobby. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but there was no signal at all. The hotel seemed to be cutting me off from the rest of the world. I heard a loud thud against the door, and the metal started to bend inward. The strength of the creature was immense, far more than any normal human. "Go away! You are not me!" I screamed at the door, but the doppelganger only laughed. Its laugh sounded like two pieces of rusted metal clinching together. It was mocking my fear and enjoying every single moment of my suffering. I noticed a small ventilation shaft in the corner of the ceiling. It was my only hope for escape. I climbed onto the desk and began to unscrew the metal cover with my pocket knife. My hands were shaking so much that I almost dropped the tool several times. Below me, the door was slowly being forced open. I could see a pale, elongated hand with sharp black claws reaching through the gap. The fingers were too long, and the skin looked like grey, wet plastic. I pushed myself into the narrow, dark tunnel just as the door burst open. I crawled through the dust vents as fast as I could. Hearing the creature enter the office below, it started to scream in a high-pitched, inhuman voice that echoed through the ventilation system. It was a sound of the 1,000 dying animals. I moved toward the back of the hotel, hoping to reach the roof. The air inside the vents was hot and smelled like all blood and rot. I could hear the doppelganger climbing into the vents behind me, its long limbs scratching against the metal walls. It was coming for me with incredible speed. I finally reached a small exit that led onto the roof of the Cecil Hotel. I pushed the heavy door open and felt the cold rain on my face. The lights of Los Angeles were bright in the distance, but the hotel roof was a dark, lonely island. I ran toward the edge looking for a way down, but the fire escape was broken and rusted. I was trapped high above the city streets. I turned around and saw the doppelganger crawling out of the vent, its yellow eyes glowing like two small suns in the midnight rain. The creature stood up and began to change its shape again. Its neck stretched out like a snake, and its smile became even wider, revealing rows of thin, needle-like teeth. It did not look like me anymore. It looked like a monster made of shadows and plastic flesh. The Cecil always keeps its guest, it whispered. The Cecil always keeps its guest. It whispered using a voice that sounded like a combination of everyone who had ever died in the hotel. It stepped closer to me, its movements jerky and unnatural. I realized that there was no way to defeat this thing. I backed away until my heels were hanging over the edge of the roof. Below me was a 10-story drop to the hard concrete alleyway. I looked at the creature one last time, and it reached out a cold grey hand toward my throat. I saw my own reflection in its glowing yellow eyes, a man filled with pure, hopeless terror. The creature spoke one final word, "Please." At that moment, I realized that many of the people walking the streets of Los Angeles might not be human at all. They might all be mimics waiting for their turn. The next morning, the day shift guard arrived and found the security office door distorted. He checked the cameras and saw footage of me walking calmly out of the hotel and down. The guard on the screen looked normal, but he had a strange, frozen smile on his face. He waved at the camera and vanished into the crowded city streets. The real John was never seen again. If you ever see a friend or a family member with a smile that is just a little too wide, don't walk toward them. Run.